Would you believe me if I told you I knew this is where the balls would end up after the break? Let me show you what I mean. What's going on, everybody? It's been well over a year since I last showed you how to break a 9-ball rack in 2 different ways. Well, today I'm here to show you a third way to break a 9-ball rack that'll allow you to highly predict where all 9 balls will be after the break. Now let's get started. Now, the first thing I'd like to go over, and probably the most important thing, is going to be the rack. There is no way that you're going to be able to highly predict where all the balls will go after the break unless you have a tight, consistent rack where all the balls are frozen together. And there's no better rack that can give you a tight, consistent rack than some form of a template rack. And the rack that I'm going to use today is the new red Outsville Accu-Racks that I just recently purchased. And I'll provide a link in the description below in case you'd like to get one of your own. Now, when you're using a template rack, one thing that you want to be careful about is how you place the top hole of the rack onto the foot spot. You'll notice here that I have a horizontal line that runs through my foot spot, and I have that lined up with the center diamonds of my side rails. Then I also have a vertical line that runs down my foot spot that is lined up with the center diamond of my short rail. And that is so that when I place the rack onto the foot spot, I want to see that the horizontal line runs completely through the middle of the top hole of the rack, and that the vertical line runs completely through the middle of the bottom hole of the rack to show me that I have the rack perfectly lined up. Because there was a point in time that I actually did notice that I was racking to where the horizontal line was slightly above the middle of the top hole of the rack. And when I was doing that, what I started to notice was that the one ball was falling in the opposite side pocket from which I'm breaking from, and I don't want that to happen because I'm trying to play position on the one ball after the break. So be careful when you line this up, because if you start to notice that the one ball is falling into the side pocket, then this would be the first place to look to try to fix that. Next, we can just place the balls appropriately onto the rack. You don't really have to push anything together until they're all loaded. Now from here, gently push them together, push up onto the rack, and then they should almost fall right back into place. And then you do one last final check by just gently brushing them together to see if any of them budge. And if they don't, you now have a perfectly tight, consistent rack. The next thing I'd like to show you is where I'm placing the cue ball on the table and where exactly am I hitting the cue ball for the break. Now, as far as the placement is concerned, it's no different than the second way that I've shown y'all on how to break a 9-ball rack. And that's to line it up with the point of the corner pocket and then move it 2 diamonds up. Now, where I'm hitting the cue ball for the break is ever so slightly above center. And that is so that when I hit the rack, I'm expecting the weight of the rack to push the cue ball back. And with that slight above center hit on the cue ball, I'm hoping the cue ball will pick up a little bit of forward roll before it makes contact with the rack. That way, when the rack pushes it back, that little bit of forward roll that the cue ball has will fight back and then hopefully stop somewhere near the middle of the table. Now, you have to be careful when you're putting slightly above center on the cue ball, because if you put too much above center on the cue ball, you're going to end up with a result that looks like this. And the cue ball is just going to push its way through the rack, though you might not always scratch. Another thing that you have to be careful about when striking the cue ball is if you don't have a straight stroke and you accidentally put a little bit of bottom spin on the cue ball, because that's going to cause the one ball to have some top spin on it due to spin transfer, which could cause it to also fall into the side pocket like this. Now you have to hope that you have position on the 2 ball. Now, as far as to where exactly am I trying to hit the 1 ball, it's not going to be directly straight from where the cue ball starts, but ever so slightly to the right of center between the cue ball and the 1 ball. I'm talking literally by like 1 millimeter or 1 degree off center. And that is so that when the weight of the rack pushes the cue ball back, it hopefully comes down directly towards the middle of the table. And with that little bit of forward roll that I talked about, you get the cue ball to land somewhere near the center of the table. Now, you do have a lot of leeway with this. It doesn't have to be exactly 1 millimeter or 1 degree off center, and you'll still be able to get the results that I'm about to show you. But if you start to notice that your cue ball heads off this way and possibly contacts the left side rail, then you're aiming slightly to the left of center between the cue ball and the 1 ball. And if your cue ball heads off this way and possibly contacts the right side rail, then you're aiming too far to the right of center between the cue ball and the 1 ball. Now, if you're able to do everything correctly, then here's where all 9 balls are going to go. The 1 ball will head down this way and pass the side pocket, catch the side rail, and then land somewhere in this area over here and be set up for this corner pocket. But if you hit the rack too hard, then the 1 ball can keep on coming and possibly end up on the bottom rail and possibly even bank its way up to be set up for this corner pocket. For the balls that are in the second row, since I'm breaking on my left side of the table, the ball that's on the right, or the 3 ball in this case, tends to bank off the side rail and then head towards the cross side pocket, while the ball that's on the left, or the 6 ball, tends to come over to the side rail and then lands somewhere right around here. Now, since I'm also breaking from the left side of the table, y'all all should be aware by now that I'm expecting the left wing ball, or the 4 ball in this case, to fall into the corner pocket. The 9 ball really shouldn't go anywhere unless a ball comes and kicks it out of the rack, while the right wing ball tends to go 3 rails, and it could possibly head towards this side pocket, maybe even the corner pocket. For the balls that are in the 4th row, the left ball, or the 8 ball, tends to come over to the side rail and then head its way over to the right side of the table, which is where the right 4th ball, or the 5 ball in this case, also has a tendency to go, because it'll come off this side rail, and those 2 balls might get cluttered up, or they'll both have a path to go towards this corner pocket. And then the ball that's in the back of the row should bank off of the short rail and then start heading towards this corner pocket. Now, if you were paying attention during that whole entire explanation, you heard me say that a couple of balls are actually passing through this area over here. So the biggest thing that you hope doesn't happen is a collision, because then that changes the entire results. But if everything goes according to plan, you should get a spread that looks like this. Now, y'all saw that there was a collision, and that's why the 6 ball is down here. But I have position on the 1 ball for the corner pocket. The 3 ball is right over here next to the side pocket. The 2 ball, which is what collided with the 6 ball, was heading down towards this way. The 9 ball didn't move. The 5 and the 8 almost tied up. Now, you heard me mention about power and how it affects where the 1 ball might end up. But clearly, it also affects all of the other balls, because the more power that you put into the break, the more the balls will spread out, and then they could possibly clutter back up, which is what you don't want to happen. So what I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to demonstrate here is 5 consecutive breaks with no edits, except I'm going to speed up the part where I'm re-racking the balls. And then as far as clocking how hard I'm actually hitting the break, I'm going to be using the Break Speed app by Predator. So let's see how consistent I can actually get this rack to spread. So that break was about 10.96 miles per hour. You saw that I still have a collision, and like I said, my cue ball is all the way off to the right. So therefore, I struck a little too far to the right of center, but I still have a shot at the one ball. That's what I meant by how much leniency you have when you perform this break. Okay, let's see for the second break. Okay, that time we didn't have a collision. You can see the two balls all the way down here. The 7 ball made it all the way here. I have position on the 1 ball, and the 8 and the 5, they did almost tie up, but I do have a clear shot at the 5 ball to go into the corner pocket. And that speed was 11.42 miles per hour. All right, let's see how break 3 goes. Okay, this time we got a collision again, and we got a little bit of a different result here as now the cue ball is actually behind the 1 ball. The 6 ball is back down here again because of the collision, but it looks like everything else behaved. And that was at 10.66 miles per hour. Now for the fourth break. This time we had a really bad collision, and now I don't have position of the 1 ball because my 2 ball gets in the way. And that was at 11.2 miles per hour. And now for our fifth break. And as you can see, another collision. The 1 ball is down here still set up for the corner pocket. The 3 ball did almost go into the side pocket. The 2 and the 7 are not exactly where they expected to be, but the 5, 8, and 9 are. So I'm actually really glad that between these 5 racks, everything didn't go according to plan. But I hope you're able to see the consistency of where all 9 balls actually go. And that last break was done at 11.57 miles per hour, which roughly gives an average between 10 to 11 miles per hour for the break. Now, one thing I'm pretty sure all of y'all were paying attention to during the course of those 5 breaks is how the app was showing you that my top speed break was at 18.66 miles per hour, which actually kind of shocked me because I thought I actually could get up towards 20 miles per hour. So I'm actually going to try another break here and see how hard I can actually break. And then, of course, let's see what kind of spread I get. Well, I actually beat my current top speed with 19.51 miles per hour, which I'm actually quite satisfied with. And I barely have a shot at the 2 ball, but you can see nothing is really where I expect it to be. And the last thing I want to leave you with is probably one of the hardest rack patterns that you can give yourselves. Because even if you know where all the balls are going to end up, with this break here, you should notice that just about every ball is going to be separated from one end of the table to the other. Okay, we had no collisions this time. The 1 ball is separated from the 2 is separated from the 3 is separated from the 4. The 4 to the 5 really isn't all that bad, neither is to the 7, but the 8 is separated from the 9. So let's see if I can run this rack out. Got a little out of line on that one. Good recovery. And I hit that one just a little too hard. But the whole point of all that is even if you're able to master the break, you still have to be able to shoot. And that's going to do it for today's video. Now, one thing I'd like you to take note of is how my average break speed on my 8-foot table was around 10 to 11.5 miles an hour. Because if you're practicing on a 7-foot table, the balls are going to have less distance to travel, and therefore you might have to bring the break speed down a bit to about 9 to 10 miles an hour. Whereas on a 9-foot table, the balls are going to have further distance to travel, so you might have to bring the break speed up to about 12 to 13 miles an hour. Now, I know there might be some of you out there that'll go, well, in leagues and in tournaments, you don't get to use a template rack, so this information is useless to me. And I would strongly have to disagree with that. Because as long as you're practicing with some type of template rack, you'll be learning how the rack is actually supposed to behave when it's done correctly and broken consistently. Because then when you're not using a template rack and there might be some accidental gaps in between the balls or the rack might not be oriented perfectly straight, you should see a little bit of a difference to possibly a drastic difference. But if you're seeing a drastic difference than what you're expecting, then you were either purposely or accidentally given a bad rack. But if the differences are very little than what you're expecting, then hopefully you can quickly adjust to those different reactions and still have successful breaks on top of successful runs. Now, I have literally given you everything that I've been able to learn about that 9-ball rack. So I hope the information in this video you'll be able to find useful and continue to master your breaks and get those consistent spreads like I have. So if you found this video helpful, then please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Take care, everybody.